Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The courtroom wasn't ready for what happened next, and neither are you. A global icon walked through those heavy wooden doors, not with his usual swagger, but with haunted eyes and trembling hands. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Hollywood's indestructible titan, wasn't there to promote a blockbuster or cut a wrestling promo. He was there to confess, not to a crime, but to a truth he had buried for nearly 20 years. And the truth? It's darker than any movie script you've ever seen. This isn't gossip. This is verbatim federal courtroom testimony, uncovered by inner-city press. No cameras, no PR filters, just raw, unscripted truth. And once Dwayne spoke, the world would never see Hollywood the same again. The man we know for raising eyebrows and flexing muscles raised something else that day. The curtain. Behind it, a world of silence, control, humiliation, and Sean "Diddy" Combs. Why was Diddy mentioned over and over in a federal trial? Why did the atmosphere in the courtroom change the moment Dwayne entered? And what exactly happened during those so-called initiations Dwayne endured? This is not a hit piece. This is not speculation. This is sworn testimony. A confession that stunned seasoned prosecutors, silenced defense attorneys, and left the public gasping in disbelief. If you've ever wondered what really happens behind the scenes in Hollywood, what the price of fame truly costs, this is the video you need to see. Dwayne Johnson didn't just tell a story. He cracked the foundation of an empire built on silence. And now, we're going to walk you through every disturbing detail. Grab your seat. It's time to hear the testimony that changed everything. When the side door of the courtroom creaked open, time didn't just slow, it froze. All eyes turned. The whispers stopped. The air thickened with disbelief. Dwayne. The Rock Johnson entered, but not the way fans were used to seeing him. This wasn't the polished star from red carpets, the smiling warrior from blockbuster premieres, or the charismatic motivator who could light up millions with a single eyebrow raise. No, this man looked hollow, haunted, as if he had carried something. For years, that was finally too heavy to bear. There were no bodyguards, no entourage, no movie agents smoothing the moment. Dwayne walked in alone, wearing the weight of everything he was about to say. He held no script, no statement, just the kind of truth that doesn't fit into headlines. Even Diddy, cool, calculated, sitting with his elite defense team, shifted in his chair. His posture stiffened, his jaw clenched. His lawyers leaned in, whispering rapidly, their eyes scanning for what they had missed. Because they hadn't expected this. The prosecution had said nothing. There were no leaks, no rumors. They had kept this name buried, and now it rose like a ghost. Dwayne didn't immediately take the stand. He stopped at the edge of the courtroom, rail, gripping it tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping him from collapsing under the weight of what he was about to do. He looked at the judge. "May I say something before we begin?" The judge nodded slowly, and then he turned, not just to the jury, but to everyone. The gallery, the press, the defense, the very industry that had made him a star. And then he looked at Diddy. "I don't want to be here," he began. "But I have to be. I've lived with something that's eaten away at me for almost 20 years, and the truth is, I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of what happens if I stay silent." The room didn't breathe. Every pair of eyes locked on him. Even the court reporter paused, unsure if she should blink or keep typing. He was sworn in. And when he finally took the stand, what sat in front of the court wasn't the icon. It was the man behind the brand, broken, honest, free. "You all know me as The Rock," he said, his voice trembling. "The guy who never breaks, but I'm about to break now. And you need to understand, what I'm about to say isn't just about Sean Combs. It's about how he got away with it. For so long." He paused. His hands shook. His lips quivered. I was one of them. One of the ones who thought playing along meant survival, that staying silent was strength. That's what they made us believe. He looked down. I played along, and I paid a price no one ever saw. The courtroom was still. A silence so complete it pressed on your chest. No cameras clicked. No phones buzzed. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Because this wasn't just celebrity testimony. This was a man shattering his own myth, peeling back the image, the fame, the success, to reveal a truth more powerful than any blockbuster he'd ever made. This was the moment Dwayne Johnson decided to stop surviving and start telling the truth. Dwayne Johnson leaned into the microphone. His voice was low, barely more than a whisper, the sound of a man speaking from a place he never wanted to revisit. It was 2001. I had just wrapped The Scorpion King. I was in between two worlds, leaving wrestling behind, stepping into film. I was ambitious, hungry, and, looking back, completely unprepared. The courtroom sat still, riveted. That's when I met Diddy. Or rather, when he decided to meet me. At first, Diddy came off as generous, charismatic, a kingmaker. Dwayne said he was introduced to him through a mutual contact and was quickly swept into what seemed like a golden opportunity: exclusive industry parties, private dinners, introductions to agents, directors, and executives. I thought I had found a mentor, someone who could help me crack open Hollywood's doors. I didn't know I was walking into something much darker. Dwayne recalled the early red flags, the odd late-night calls, the cryptic questions like, would you bleed for success? Or, would you prove loyalty no matter what? They sounded like jokes at first, but there was no laughter, just a stare that said this wasn't a game. Then came the first real test. He was summoned to a Bel Air mansion at exactly 2:13 a.m. The instruction was specific. Be alone, be punctual. When he arrived, he was the only person there. No music, no lights, just silence. Slowly others entered, men in dark suits, expressionless, mute. Diddy was the last to arrive. He turned off the lights, lit a few red candles, and played a recording. The recording repeated the same question, over and over. Are you worthy? Are you ready? Will you eat what I feed you? It was chilling, Dwayne said. It felt like a cult ritual, not a networking event. I kept trying to rationalize it. Hollywood's weird. This is probably some elite initiation thing. But in my gut, I knew I wasn't safe. Then came the night that broke him. A few weeks later, he was told to meet at a remote location. No address, just coordinates. His publicist reassured him, this is it, the meeting that will define your career. He arrived by car, blindfolded, driven by someone who didn't speak. The music was loud, deliberately so. When they arrived, Dwayne was escorted inside by two silent men. The house was draped in black cloth. Red lanterns glowed along the floor. There were no windows. He was seated at a low table surrounded by 5 men in suits. At the head, Diddy, calm, smiling, holding a glass of something thick and dark. Then the tray was brought in, a steel platter, steam still rising. The man in a white robe uncovered it slowly. There were chunks of raw monkey brain, wet, trembling. No seasoning, no explanation. Dwayne choked on the words. Diddy looked at me and said, everyone who's made it, ate. Everyone who didn't, vanished. He tried to leave. The door was locked. He asked if it was a joke. No one laughed. Then Diddy leaned in, whispered into his ear, Hollywood isn't about talent. It's about obedience. That moment stuck, with him more than the meal itself. I picked up the spoon. My hands were shaking. I bit down. The courtroom sat frozen. I don't remember the taste. I remember the sound, the silence, the feeling that something inside me had just died. After. It was over, Diddy clapped. Welcome to level 2, he said. But it didn't end there. The next phase was what Dwayne described as mental reprogramming. He was invited to what he believed was a performance workshop, a private retreat in the desert. When he arrived, his phone was taken. His belongings were searched. He was shown to a small room, bare, windowless. Music played on a loop, sometimes soft, sometimes deafening. There were no clocks, no schedules. Food came at random. Instructions were vague. We were told to repeat affirmations. I surrender to success. I trust the system. Over and over again. He wasn't alone. Other entertainers were there, some early in their careers, some household names. We weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to. The ones who tried to resist were taken out of the room. We never saw them again, he described, seeing fellow performers with blank stares, some weeping, some chanting under their breath, all of them isolated, disoriented. I thought I was going crazy. But then I saw them too. Those same eyes. That look of silent recognition. Like, you too? The retreat lasted 3 days. When he left, he felt broken. I started doubting myself. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own instincts. He described this as the point where he became a product. I wasn't acting anymore. I was being puppeteered. Opportunities poured in, but they came with unspoken strings. Every new role, every endorsement deal, every press opportunity, it all came with the same invisible price. Silence, and the worst part, no one talked about it. Not in public, not even in private. We were all just surviving. He looked at the jury. This wasn't hazing. This wasn't eccentric Hollywood stuff. This was a system designed to strip us down, build us back up as obedient, silent, controllable. As Dwayne Johnson continued his testimony, the courtroom remained gripped, not by the spectacle of fame, but by the sheer weight of what he was exposing. After that retreat, he said, things changed, but not for the better. He described, returning to his day-to-day life with the same public routine, photo shoots, interviews, brand deals. But internally, something was off. I was more paranoid, more anxious. I stopped sleeping. I started questioning everything, every phone call, every meeting, every smile that lingered too long. He realized that the experiences he'd rationalized as weird Hollywood stuff were something else entirely, something carefully constructed to manipulate. It wasn't eccentric. It was engineered. It was about control. Dwayne said the rituals were only the beginning. What came after was more invisible and far more effective. They didn't just want obedience during the rituals. They wanted it to follow you, to live in your head, to become automatic. He explained how the psychological pressure continued. Long after he left the retreat, you start censoring yourself without even thinking. You start speaking more carefully, second-guessing your instincts. You become your own handler. He began recognizing the pattern. Praise followed by monitoring. Success followed by surveillance. I'd land roles I didn't chase, projects I hadn't heard of. But each came with this unspoken understanding. Stay grateful, stay quiet. He described hearing the same lines over and over from different sources. You're one of the loyal ones. Diddy put in a word. You know how the game works. They sounded like compliments. But they felt like handcuffs. Success became the leash, he said. It was never about celebrating your talent. It was about reminding you who gave you the platform. He began to notice it everywhere, in the eyes of fellow entertainers, in the tension that never left a room when certain names were mentioned. People weren't thriving, they were surviving. Always looking over their shoulder, always wondering if they'd said too much. Even his own team, people who had been with him from the start, became quiet, reserved, strategic in their conversations. No one said anything, directly, but everyone knew. You didn't question, you didn't joke, You played the part. And when he did push back, when he requested changes to a contract, turned down a suspicious meeting, he noticed the shift. The calls slowed. Meetings got canceled. Deals vanished with no explanation. It was never a direct punishment, just a quiet erasure. You don't get blacklisted with a headline, you just fade. The most disturbing part? You start to believe maybe it's your fault. Maybe you're paranoid, maybe you're imagining things. That's how deep it goes. He said the true genius of the system wasn't in its brutality, but in its subtlety. They didn't need to lock you in a room. They just needed to make you afraid to leave the one they built for you. He paused, looking down at the stand, then up at the jury. You don't need fences when people build their own walls. He described the growing disconnection from himself, how he no longer recognized the man in the mirror. You smile for fans. You do press junkets. You tell the world you're living your dream. But inside, you're empty, because the dream came at the cost of your identity. His voice cracked. That's the real price of fame. Not the red carpets or the rumors. It's the silence, the isolation, the slow erosion of who you used to be. As the courtroom listened in stunned silence, Dwayne Johnson began to describe what he called the machine behind the curtain, a network of invisible power, whispered alliances and favors traded behind closed doors. After those rituals, after the retreats, everything changed, he said. Suddenly, doors opened. That had always been shut. I was getting calls I hadn't earned, offers I hadn't pursued. But the success came with a shadow. These weren't opportunities, he said. They were assignments. And behind each one was a silent agreement. Stay in line. He described how his name began appearing on major studio projects out of nowhere. When he asked why, the answer was always the same. Diddy vouched for you. And that phrase wasn't comforting. It was chilling. It meant someone was watching. Someone was pulling strings. And if they could get you in, they could also pull you out. He explained how nothing was accidental. Roles weren't just about talent or fit. They were tests, tokens of loyalty. And every meeting, every script, every handshake was a reminder. Someone gave you this. They wanted to remind you that they built you, and they could unbuild you. Dwayne described meeting with a studio executive, someone powerful, someone respected. We didn't talk about acting. We didn't talk about story arcs or characters. He said, "We hear you're someone who plays the game. That's what matters here." That moment hit him hard. It wasn't about craft. It wasn't about passion. It was about compliance. I realized I was no longer being seen as a person. I was a product. And products don't speak. They perform. He recalled turning down an invite to an after-hours gathering. Just one time. The following week, my name disappeared from a major deal. No warning. Just gone. That's when the pattern became undeniable. It was a warning. Stay in line, or disappear. Even the people around him, his team, his peers, knew the rules. Some played along willingly. Others quietly folded under the pressure. People whispered. They warned. But no one ever said the names out loud. Not on the record. That's how deep the fear ran. Dwayne said Diddy wasn't just a music mogul. He was a gatekeeper, a financial stakeholder, a behind-the-scenes power broker with influence in boardrooms, studios, and endorsement deals. He had investments. He had favors. He had people who owed him. And when he wanted something to happen, it happened. He described a culture where silence wasn't just encouraged. It was enforced. Speak up, you vanish. Push back, you lose everything. He looked out at the courtroom gallery. I saw it happen, again and again. Not just to me, to people I respected, people who were talented, people who didn't play the game. And what happened to them? They were erased. No press coverage, no scandal. Just a slow, quiet removal from the spotlight. That's the real power, Dwayne said. Not being able to build someone up, but being able to make them disappear without a trace. He admitted that for years he played along, smiled, nodded, stayed silent. Because I thought I had to. I thought that's what success demanded. But over time, that silence became a prison. I wasn't protecting myself. I was protecting them. The people who controlled the game and made sure no one else could even touch the board. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And once you see the machine, you can't unsee it. Dwayne Johnson's eyes scanned the courtroom slowly. The tension was thick, but his voice was steadier now, like a man who had crossed a threshold he could never return from. I kept telling myself I was lucky, he said. I told myself I was one of the fortunate few who made it out. But that wasn't the truth. He explained how the longer he stayed in Hollywood, the more disconnected he became from the version of himself that started the journey. I used to think hard work and talent would carry me. I believed that. But slowly, I started to see it was never just about work. It was about obedience. Then came the turning point, a night he could never forget. I was invited to a private screening at a Hollywood Hills estate. That's how they framed it, a networking night, just like the others. But from the moment he arrived, he knew it wasn't what it seemed. The house was dim, security was tight, phones were confiscated, guests were handed masks, not party, masks. Masks to hide who they were. The atmosphere wasn't celebratory. It was cold, tense, performative. Everyone was smiling, but no one looked happy. I walked the perimeter, just watching. What I saw broke me. He described entertainers, actors, musicians, influencers, people he admired, behaving in ways that didn't match the glamour. Some looked afraid. Others looked lost. Everyone seemed to be performing, not partying. I saw a young actor crying in the hallway. He looked at me and whispered, "They told me this is what it takes." Dwayne paused. His voice dropped. That moment shattered something inside me. He left early that night. Drove home in silence. Didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just sat in the dark, staring at nothing, replaying every choice that brought him there. I wasn't there because they respected me. I was there because I had stayed quiet, because I had proven I wouldn't speak. And for the first time, he questioned whether survival was worth the silence. That young man reminded me of who I used to be, before the fear, before the shame, before the machine. He looked at the judge. That was the night I decided, if anyone ever asked me what I saw, I wouldn't lie. As Dwayne Johnson sat taller in the witness chair, the room leaned in two, his silence, each second heavier than the last. Then he spoke. "People ask why we stay quiet," he said. "Why actors, musicians, athletes, people with platforms don't speak up when we see things that aren't right." He took a breath, eyes locked forward. "I'll tell you why, because it's terrifying." Dwayne explained that for much of his early career, silence felt like the only path to survival. You're taught not to ruffle feathers. Don't say names, don't ask questions. You think, if I speak, I lose everything. He looked down briefly, then back up with quiet resolve. It's not always a threat. Sometimes it's just watching someone disappear, watching them fade from every room, every deal, every call. He spoke of others, actors who vanished after walking away, not because they lost their talent, but because they stopped playing along. They weren't unstable, they weren't broken, they were just tired of being owned. Then, in a voice that barely needed amplification, Dwayne said what many had feared to say aloud. "I stayed silent not because I was guilty. I stayed silent because I was afraid." He nodded toward Cassie Ventura's legal team. But seeing her come forward changed everything. It reminded me, silence doesn't protect the right people. Then came the moment no one could prepare for. Dwayne turned to face Diddy, not as a celebrity, not as a wrestler or actor, but as a man. "You made me believe I had to sacrifice who I was just to belong. That integrity was optional. That shame was a ticket to success." He paused. emotion swelling in his throat. But that wasn't power. That was fear, dressed up as influence. He turned back to the courtroom. To anyone who's still stuck in silence, afraid no one will believe them, let this be the moment you realize the silence is over. And then, Dwayne stood. No applause, no music, just quiet respect. As he walked away, he turned once more. This story isn't just about me. It's for everyone who never got the chance to speak.